It's the Ballot Battleground Nevada Road Show. We're taking the podcast on the road in Carson City in a shoebox-sized room with the one and only Will Adler. Will, thank you so much for being here.
Ben, this is taking me back. You and I and microphones have a long, long history together, but it's a pleasure to host you here in the Nevada Legislature.
Yeah.
The beating heart of everything Nevada.
I was trying to think back on the first time I interviewed you. I think it had to do with whether or not children were going to get marijuana when they were trick-or-treating, because you represent the marijuana clients and whatnot.
Yes.
And you told me, no, that's not a thing, and that was pretty much most of the interview.
That argument's as valid as it is today, because marijuana gummies do still cost a lot more than normal candy, and people don't just give those away. They cost a lot. So the one-to-one economics and or risk to parents never was there. But thank you again.
It was a relatively short interview. So I'll give an introduction for people who might not know you as well as I do. The principal of Silver State Government Relations, a lobbying firm that you founded, right?
Yep.
UNR graduate. You were the Northern Nevada director for Steve Sisolak's 2018 campaign. And you represent clients, marijuana, as we just mentioned, renewable energy, many Native American tribes. Who else are you lobbying for this session?
The single greatest county in America, Story County, is still a great place in my heart. And in general, we do a lot with business and different business relations and development. I'm actually an affiliate with UNR. We work with an incubator called krnv to bring what's next to Nevada. So we're sort of covering the gambit of power, solar energy, Native Americans, and everything that Nevada is going to be talking about.
I was going to say a lot of things about what makes Nevada so great.
And still the devil's lettuce. We still got some weed in there. Don't worry.
Of course, yes. Lobbying runs in your blood, right? You weren't born in this building, but you do live here. Is that correct?
I was born adjacent to this building on Mountain Street, and I was walked in here the next day, actually, with my twin sister.
No.
We were presented on the assembly floor, actually.
With your dad?
Yeah, with my dad. He was Assemblyman Ernie Adler for the Carson City district back then, yes. And in the photo, a man is lighting himself on fire because you could still smoke on the assembly floor back then. And he was holding us as babies, and his cigarette lit his beard on fire. So, the good old days in the Nevada legislature, back when this was still a prime office, in spite of the shoebox and prison-like nature.
So you were inhaling cigarette smoke from day one. That explains so much.
Yeah, as Nevadans, we all should be proud of that we held on, and our Denny's had smoking till the very end. But yeah,
I think we're gonna need to find that picture. We'll put it up on the Instagram or something, because that's an awesome moment. And that speaks to why we wanted to bring you in, because you've been here how many sessions now, dating back to when?
As lobbyist,
as an actual working lobbyist.
As a paid lobbyist, I've been here since 2015. I actually advocated for the medical marijuana bills just as a civilian in 2013.
Awesome. Okay. So today we're doing Nevada Legislature 101, NV Leg for Dummies, kind of walking people through. The idea is if someone has never been down here in this lovely building, never thought about the legislature, but they want to kind of get involved, what do I need to know before I, lobby or advocate for a bill? So we're going to start with something real basic, just the structure of the legislature. I kind of think of it, it's like Congress, right? Bicameral legislature, two houses, the Senate kind of similar to our Senate, which is much smaller. The Nevada Assembly, similar to the House, which is much bigger. 21 members in the Senate, 21 senators, 42 Assembly members, and the senators serve 4 years. The Assembly members serve 2 years. Total comes out to 63. They sometimes call them the Gang of 63, right? Do I have that all correct?
That is correct, except for a few details. So, if possible, it'd be great if everyone represented an equal geographic area of Nevada, but really we slice it up by population. So of the 42 and 21, you actually see a high concentration around the population urban center. So a lot of these little widgets of Vegas, 4 neighborhoods at a time will be one assembly district, but you'll see giant spans of multiple counties of rural Nevada will be one assembly district for, say, usually Burger or Republican. But of that, yes, the balance is there where you have the important guys, the double downs, the 21 in the Senate side, and then the People's House, the 42, because you have 2 assembly people housed within each Senate district. So you can always say, who's my senator and my assembly person, because they always lay out on top of each other. And you always know who's going to be the next senator, because they're usually the assembly person housed in that district. You'll pick the next one.
There you go. Yeah. And so for our Northern Nevada listeners, for example, Assemblywoman Angie Taylor in the last session ran for the Senate district that her assembly district was in, and now she's the senator for that district. That happens quite a bit. Yep. Something I learned looking into this and researching for this story, Will, it's the third smallest bicameral legislature in the U.S. at only 63 members. The third smallest. Did you know that?
I did not know that, but you should explain what a bicameral legislature is,
yeah.
Probably, because third smallest is not an impressive figure anywhere. But
fair enough. Yeah.
As Ben's speaking to, Nevada has a proud tradition of having a part-time legislature. So if you go adjacent to California, other states around us, they usually have a full-time legislature where an assembly person actually has like a job of being elected, where they actually have the legislature every year. It's a continual rolling cycle. Bills can be introduced or die kind of throughout the whole cycle.
Right, yeah,
Nevada,
never ends.
Not so much, right? Nevada, we do it right. In fact, we are constitutionally limited to having our legislature once every 2 years. So every odd year, we have 120 days of madness, because constitutionally we are limited to start the first Monday in February, and we end at 120 days, called Sine Die, or
yes,
Sine
of course.
Die in Latin.
Which means without what?
Means it's dead if it's not passed. If it's
Dead.
midnight, you're done, right? That's what Sine Die means in Nevada. So forget Latin. But so that is how Nevada does it. But interestingly enough, a lot of legislatures that do this biannual lawmaking actually divide up the budget. They'll actually do the budget in the opposite year. Not Nevada, right? We load it all up, right? If you want your hopes, your dreams, your wishes, those are called bills, right? You put them in at the same time we put in the budget, and then we have to get it all done at once, and we load it all up, and we say go.
Yeah.
And that is the beauty of the Nevada legislature. But it is kind of unique. It is kind of wild, but it is this opportunity to make or break it once every 2 years, and to set a budget that actually has to last for two full years.
Yeah.
And Nevada is unique because projections are not easy, especially when a lot of your revenue is based
gaming, on casinos,
the pockets of other states. What do other people's wallets look like is Nevada's budget. So this is really one of the most unique legislatures. I'm really kind of proud of how we still structure it and get it all done in this madman way. But it is created this unique entity of the Nevada legislature that we could describe as a personality, or sort of like what it means to approach the legislature.
It is a fascinating building to have spent so many hours and days and months in, but it's all being crammed in from, as you said, early February to early June, unless there's a special session. And it feels like, anecdotally for me, there are more special sessions nowadays than maybe when I started reporting, because it's like, how do you fit all the important business of a growing, expanding state into 120 days? Sometimes you literally just can't.
Yeah, and if you need to get a stadium done here or there, you definitely need a special session. But my first special session actually was back in 2014. That was the emphasis of sort of Story County's big beginning, was the Tesla special session. So you usually see big topics get their own special session. So the large tax breaks, sort of the abatement process that we passed for Tesla, did need its own focus. It needed its own legislature, and it needed to really be its own issue. So that's where you usually see special sessions brought about, is continuation of business, didn't pass the budget, or you have something big
the Raiders
to do.
Stadium in Las Vegas, the A's Stadium, which is of course a little bit still up in the air, but the film tax thing that may or may not come back at some point, who knows. Okay, let's go through the committee structure, right? So we went through Senate and Assembly, the big chambers, the big houses, but of course there are, I forget exactly how many committees on each side, Assembly Judiciary, Assembly Ways and Means, all these committees that deal with different topics of bills. And how exactly those work, because right now, as we know, the Democrats control both the Assembly and the Senate, and that means essentially they control all these committees, right?
Yes. So the whole of it, we can maybe say, as a bill, you only have one path to being a law, and that is getting through the whole of the Nevada legislature. So as we describe the committee structure, let's maybe think of ourselves as a bill. But in the whole of the legislature, as you said, the balance of power matters, because Democrats have the majority of the elected body. We do have a majority Democrat House and Senate, but they do not have a supermajority, to make that clear. But you'll see that in your committee assignments as well. Whoever has the biggest weight or the most numbers actually fills out the most seats in each committee. So even at the committee level, the structure is usually based on who's elected here, more Democrats in committees versus Republicans, because they have more seats in the Assembly and the Senate. But as a whole, the committee structure is the substructure of each house. So as an assembly bill, say we're AB1, the first assembly bill of this session, we're going to be introduced in the assembly, but depending on what topic we are, if we're covering water and water issues, we'll go to the Natural Resources Committee. The assembly has its own Natural Resources Committee. So as a bill, it is first sent to a committee, and the committee structure debates the bill, they take it apart, they look at what's there, and if it needs changing, it has to go through what's called the amendment process. Amendments are usually introduced at the committee level, debated there, and whatever is needed to be changed is actually voted on in an amendment vote at the committee level. That's passed, and then the committee says, we're going to vote this bill through and pass our committee. That is the first place where your bill can die, right? So as AB1, are we going to get past the Assembly Natural Resources Committee? Yes, because we're a great bill. We're going to, make all the waters in Nevada pure. So that gets you through your first checkpoint. But once the committee's done, you have to go to a full Assembly floor vote. If you actually pass that vote with the majority of the vote, you're on to the Senate. But sadly,
start all over.
Just to keep it parallel, if you are an Assembly Natural Resources bill, you will actually be referred to the Senate. They refer you to their Senate Natural Resources Committee. They will do the same process. They will take the bill apart. They'll look at it, say, are those good amendments, those bad amendments? They'll add their own possibly. But then once that committee decides whether it looks good, it has to be voted out of that committee and then back to the Senate floor. Senate then does what, Ben?
Senate takes a full vote on it. All 21 senators. You just need a simple majority of 11 in the Senate to pass that bill. Mm-hmm. If there were major changes, it does have to go then back to the Assembly, right?
Yes.
So back to the Assembly for like a third vote. What they may be voting on by the third time through this process is a significantly different bill oftentimes than what was initially introduced.
So a little interjection there is, if somebody's sick on the Senate, that's when the real fun comes in because the lieutenant governor is relevant, right?
Yeah.
He can actually be the tie-breaking vote. He's the procedure over the Senate. So occasionally that does happen where you have a hung vote, and very occasionally,
I haven't seen
the lieutenant governor matters, and he gets to actually cast a vote in the Senate of weight. But it actually doesn't go back to the Assembly, and this is where the real fun happens. The real magic is called a conference committee in Nevada. So if you actually have a bill that is received from the Assembly, or AB1, goes to the Senate and gets amended, it then has to be referred back to the Assembly. They can reject it outright and say, we do not concur with this bill. And that is the one magical thing with Nevada legislature is a conference committee can actually be assigned where 3 members of the Senate and 3 of the Assembly come together, and they actually decide the final language of a bill in that room. So those are sort of the magic.
You have to be there in person to witness this.
Yes, and you have to be there in person to actually vote as one of these 3 members. But those 6 votes are the final vote of the bill. So that is the most dramatic case where if we were not concurred by the Assembly, the Senate changes were not amenable to them. They say, those amendments aren't as good as the ones we had. No concurrence. Yeah. That is the final step. Would be a conference committee, but that happens to maybe 10% of the bills or less that pass.
Yeah, and in total, we're talking well over 1,000 bills usually, right? Have we had a session with 2,000 bills? It's an insane number. Maybe you know off the top of your head, maybe you don't.
Well, Robin Titus has a bill for that this year. I'll tell you what. She actually has a bill to limit the number of BDR requests.
There you go. And we'll define that for our listeners. Bill draft request is basically a lawmaker or a government agency or someone saying, I want you guys to write a bill that does X, Y, Z. It's a very generic thing that eventually the Legislative Counsel Bureau, LCB, all their lawyers and staff read Nevada law. What can we change? What can we not change? They turn it into a bill, and there's hundreds and hundreds, usually over 1,000 bills. How many usually tend to get passed in a session? Because realistically, there's not enough time to get to all of these.
What is passed and what is a law is different. So let's start with the BDR. You're exactly right. Each assembly person, each senator gets a limited number of BDRs. Senators are twice as important as assembly people, so they get twice as many BDR requests.
Yep.
I'm just throwing that out to make sure everyone gets mad at me. But BDRs are the beginning of it, or a bill draft request. When it becomes a bill, it is AB. We were Assembly Bill 1, so we're the first Assembly bill, or SB, a Senate bill. The other sources of bills do come from state agencies. Counties have their own bills, cities get their own bills, and they all get disseminated out as BDRs that become ABs or SBs, depending on their origin as well. But at the end of the day, the one thing we didn't talk about is the the legislature can pass our bill. AB1 is passed through our conference committee even.
Yep.
It still has one vote left.
Of course, yeah.
And that vote is the veto pen vote, right?
Yep.
The ultimate vote is the governor's veto in the whole of this. But that's why some people say it doesn't matter how many bills are actually launched into a legislature.
Sure.
Because the majority of them do get committed out. They do have some process, but around 600, 700 bills are passed, I would say, on average between the last sessions I've gone through. But some are cleanup bills, some are big bills, and some of the monumental ones or controversial ones actually end up on that veto desk. But we saw that last year, right? It doesn't really matter what comes out of the legislature if the governor still has control of the veto pen or the Senate or Assembly don't have 2/3 of the vote.
There you go.
The governor retains veto. But I just want to say with this is legislation is important. It is crucial to have a lot of ideas out there.
Yep.
But the number usually consolidates naturally because there will be multiple ideas, multiple BDRs or bills in the same lane.
Sure.
And you get this dissemination of ideas throughout the legislature. Committees will combine ideas into one bill, and it actually comes through cleaner in Nevada law or statute. So maybe it's not, does that bill die because it's a bad bill, but it is maybe an overkill to have as many bills as we do have.
And we should say, too, that whichever party controls the chambers, they control all the committees. They control which bills even get heard in front of those committees. So, for example, in this session and several sessions past with Democrats in control, if there's a Republican bill that Democrats do not like, it's going to get drafted and written into a bill, but a lot of those are never going to see the light of day even, right?
Yep, and that is the power of the elected democracy that we have today is the majority rules. But at the committee level, the chair of the committee is a Democrat in every case because they have the majority in the Assembly and the Senate. The chair actually gets to select, even though bills are referred from the floor, the Assembly floor, the committee chair does set their calendar and they only hear the bills they wish to hear.
Yeah.
There's a lot of horse trading. There's a lot of pushing and pulling to try and get your bills heard. But ultimately, I would say Republicans could safely say the majority of their bills have yet to actually get through the committee process in the last couple legislatures.
Yeah, so for our viewers and listeners, you might see, Republicans introduced X bill that would do this thing, and it's just realistically, the news might do a story on it because it's potentially an interesting bill that appeals to a lot of people, but realistically probably going nowhere. I can think of, voter ID bills in previous sessions. They get introduced, they get written, and they die before they even get a chance. Let's talk, 120-day session because it's a grind, it's a slog, it's a sprint and a marathon, I think, at the same time. There's deadlines all along the way where bills are not making it through and they're kind of getting whittled down. Talk me through a couple of the big deadlines. We don't want to get into all of them, but where a lot of bills end up dying.
Yeah, you're looking at the happy days of the legislature right now. We're in February. All the bills are coming out. They haven't even been assigned to all the committees yet. So we don't even know what bills are not going to get heard in committee yet. But your big deadline days actually are around your committee calendars. So introduction to committee is a big deadline day. It happens sometime around March. But the really big ones are your committee passage votes. So your first committee passage is in March this year, end of March this year as well. But your first floor vote is where you start seeing these death days coming, right? You'll start seeing lobbyists scrambling around the floors, people banging on doors, trying to get meetings, because if you can't propagate your bill out of committee onto the floor, that's one big death day. But if you can't actually stimulate that floor vote, you're dead in the water, because if your first floor vote goes smoothly, you have momentum, it sends you right into the committee on the other side, Assembly bill going to the Senate, has a good reception on the Senate side. But if there's a lot of controversy, there's some chop, that's when you start seeing bills fall by the wayside, because you have a great idea, but do you have the votes? And that's where these death days start counting.
That is the big question. Let's talk about kind of the flow of a session. You mentioned right now it's the happy days, the first few weeks where every bill theoretically has a chance. There's a lot of budget presentations and presentations about how different agencies work and things like that. on last Monday when it was the first day of the legislature. People say it's like the first day of school type thing. Yeah. When does the session really start to kick into high gear, and when does it become, scary for lobbyists that are advocating for certain bills?
Yeah, I would say, like I said, your committee bills and your first committee passes around March 24th. So really things start getting intense there. Are you getting it out of your first committee or not? When the grind starts happening. But the first real deadline day is your first House passage is April 22nd this year, my daughter's birthday. So I actually have a long tradition of my wife and I giving birth to children right in the middle of the legislature. So I always make it easy
Good
on myself.
timing
But
for you guys. Yep.
Not this year. So
okay, nice.
we got all three in now. But yeah, so that is kind of the whole of it is when you need to have your votes, you need to have them, right? Everything can be fluid until then. You can horse trade, you can make your amendments happen, you can go gather the votes you need, but by April 22nd, you kind of know what bills you still have, what are dead, and then that's your target goal is to get those across the finish line. And we could talk about how that happens too.
Yeah, pull back the curtain for us a little bit for how the building really operates. I mean, who has the power in this building? Because I think it's often said, there are hundreds of lobbyists like yourself run around this building. There's only 63 lawmakers, but the lobbyists do wield a lot of power. How does this building kind of really operate? What are the things maybe that go on behind the scenes that the public might not realize? You mentioned horse trading. It's like, yeah, I'll pass your bill if you do what? Give us some insight there.
I would say, the perception is not the reality in a lot of cases. So I do not walk in with 2 big bags of cash with dollar signs on it and just throw them on tables. In fact, Nevada is one of my favorite legislative operations because this is truly a public house. This is the people's house, the Nevada legislature, and we have a proud tradition of letting the whole of the public in. So you say how, what gets a bill done? Actually, mass action, delivery of support, it moves the bill a lot. Today is Tribe Day. We actually have 27 of tribal nations in Nevada, and we probably have 20 of them in the building today. But having your voices heard isn't just a lobbying effort. It isn't just horse trading. It is the needs of Nevada. So there's actually pretty good history of, having Nevada be more open than others. I've tried to lobby in California.
How did that go?
I'm here for a reason. Yeah, they kicked me out the first day I made it there because there is procedures there where you are unable to speak to an assembly person, a senator, or unless you have a prearranged meeting.
Wow.
Nevada, you and I know this, Ben.
Yeah.
You grab somebody
wait
down the
outside
hall,
and
you ask them what's going on with their bill, and it is an open house. So I do think Nevada is one of the most transparent legislatures. How you get a bill done usually regards what the bill is. If you're trying to get something structural and base done, tribal relations is my big norm. Water rights, water language, there's no amount of money in the world that will move water law. You actually have to come with the right sensible policy around the right issue. Bigger issues, larger stuff, a stadium per se.
Sure.
You will see every lobbyist in the building hired onto that sucker.
Yeah.
And it's sort of more of a mad dash of corporate interest versus getting that piece of the state cake, right? But to suss it up a little bit is every bill, like you said, has a sponsor. It is either the party in power, the party not. Having that bill heard in a committee could be your biggest task as a lobbyist is actually trying to get that issue heard in spite the name on the bill. Could be the beginning of your horse trading. But to actually get a bill done, I would say the long and the short is you start out with your vision, your idea, and what your client or your government agency, as I usually have, wants to get done. And the world has their say on it too. You hear from entities you didn't even know would have an interest in it, and it does change your perspective on your issue usually. But at the end of the day, I say if you end up pretty pissed off, pretty frustrated, and about 70% of what you initially started with is still in the bill, that's a 100% win. I mean, that is literally what the Nevada legislature is you end up with an idea, you have to adapt it based on the state, because we're here judging the whole of Nevada in 120 days. And you hear from everybody for whatever your issue is, because you put it in writing, and now they're able to see what you want to do, and usually the comments come in. But that's usually the legislative process is there's no perfect bill when it enters, but there is a decision to be made of, is it worth getting done? Even at this 70% of what you want to get done.
And as you say, we'll talk about the vetoes a little bit because that is the kind of the final hurdle. It goes to the governor's office. In this case, we have a Republican governor, but Democratic chambers in the assembly. And so a lot of Democratic bills are getting sent out. A lot of them in the last session at least got vetoed. I think 75. It was the all-time record. That's the same dynamic that we're going to have in this legislative session. What are the ramifications, though, of the supermajority that you mentioned? It's 2/3. Democrats are just shy of that right now. That's a threshold that we talk about a lot because if Democrats had a supermajority, they'd be able to do what?
So Democrats probably don't want a supermajority as much as everyone thinks they do. I'll say this on the record for everyone.
Okay, explain.
Because the dynamics of the Nevada legislature are pretty continual, actually, other than Steve Sisolak. For about the last 30 years, we've had Nevada claim itself as a purple state by having this continual Democratic legislature again and again elected in for the Senate and the Assembly, but the state has elected a Republican governor other than Steve Sisolak continually for about the last 30 years. But this has created this balance of power where Democratic issues are brought forward more frequently, but they ultimately have to be judged by the Republican governor and have that overview for the state. So this has created what is considered sort of a business-friendly atmosphere around, corporate issues, tax issues, and other things around the gaming environment. But also, the governor's say is the say. He had a lot of says last session. He did set the record with 75 bills, but I would say a lot, not the majority, but a good portion of the bills sent to the governor were sent to him as demonstration bills. Some bills were sent in because you're positioning a Republican governor to have to say no. Yeah. If you push him,
put the ball in his court, make him sign the veto pen.
Yep. And if you push on enough buttons, bills will get vetoed because business interests, other people will demand that of a Republican governor. But that is the balance Nevada faces, is we have a good, strong blue backbone of the legislature, but they ultimately know they have to negotiate with the governor because the veto will be there. If there wasn't a minority strength in the Republican Party, at least 1/3 in the Senate and 1/3 in the Assembly, if the Democrats actually had a full supermajority, as it's called, in the Senate and the Assembly, they would be able to override the governor's veto. This is a process that actually could be done today. The vetoes from the last session were reintroduced again, all 75, but none of those bills I think would be taken up because the Democrats don't have the strength to override the vetoes.
Right. Yeah.
But if you actually want to position yourself for that fight, it would be a tough one, even if you wanted to override a governor's veto and had the power. Positionally, you would have to get the bills passed, get them to the governor fast enough to have him veto it with enough time to reintroduce it in this legislature and then overturn that vote. But having that overturn, you would have to own everything in that bill and all the language in it. So the balance of power is probably one that the Democrats appreciate too, because they don't have to fully own every issue in the state.
Yeah.
They know that there's that negotiation in the middle, but politics is politics. We all position each other accordingly and boo vetoes and claim we need to make vetoes as politics declares.
Yeah, well, they can tell their voters and their constituents, we did everything we could possibly do to solve X issue. We sent it to the governor. We passed the bill, and it got vetoed. So they can pin a lot of that on him, and that gets happened quite a bit. One last thing, we're starting to wrap up here, but we touched on it briefly, this idea of the citizen legislature. These lawmakers, since it's only a 120-day session, they have real jobs. They have day jobs. I want to ask you, we've had, doctors, lawyers, a plumber, Senator Ira Hansen. What's the most interesting, day job career of a lawmaker that you can recall out of all your sessions here?
I would say the most interesting day job career of a lawmaker was probably the godfather of pot, which became Tick Sigerbloom's day job as the sponsor of all cannabis legislation. He ended up just with a shrine of cannabis sent to him in his office, and he became a bit of a known cannabis attorney as well, and now a Clark County commissioner. But I think more interesting is, like you said, the civilian legislature, or what that means. I just want to give credit to all the public servants who actually bothered to serve as an assembly person or a senator.
Yeah.
I want to state this very loudly, that they actually only get paid for the first 60 days of the 120-day session. They only receive checks for the first 60 days. Ask any of them. Do your next story. Because Nevada is a part-time legislature, but also a very underfunded part-time legislature.
Sure, yeah.
No one here is making a lot of money sitting here for 120 days, other than the lobbyists. Let's be very clear. Because, this is a civilian legislature. It's part-time, and there's a lot of teachers, there's a lot of retirees, there's a lot of police officers, but a lot of people who just actually want to do good in Nevada. They have a vision, they know something needs to change, and they run for an issue usually. But when they get into this place, they realize there's a whole state to govern, and they get sucked into the budget and all of it. So you really see some good people here for the right reasons, because they're not here for a paycheck.
No, they're getting
as a assembly
paid.
person.
If you did the math and all the hours they spend here, it's not a 40-hour week, especially at the end. I mean, those are 60, 80-hour weeks probably sometimes. So they're getting paid pennies on the dollar. So I will echo your comments there.
Yes, and I would say, don't get tagged into the bad ones. Michelle Fiore was fun. It was great to have the Bundys walk in fully armed with assault rifles to her office, but the stories in the Nevada legislature are underappreciated for the little stories, the teachers who serve, the public servants, and kind of the people who say, I'm actually going to run for office, go through the hell of an election, by the way, and come to this building and try and bring my ideas forward, bring my constituents' ideas forward, and do good every day in this building, because they really are in committee more hours than we are, 12-hour days, and not getting paid much for it. So I do think Nevada's unique, that people who sign up to serve are doing it for the right reason. And this is a public building, guys. You can come and meet them, come down and see them.
Absolutely, hang out.
And really experience it for yourself, because it's unique that Nevada has an open door to anyone who wants to be here. You can sign up a committee and testify yourself.
Yeah. Before we wrap up here, put you on the spot. Best memory or thing about the Nevada legislature, if you haven't mentioned already, and best Carson City establishment for people who are down here.
Okay, so let's start with the second question first. So a Carson City establishment that is a secret that you're not allowed to tell anyone about.
Okay, we won't.
The single greatest food in Carson City is inside the Cactus Jack Casino. The guy with the big howdy arm there is TJ's Thai Corner. He's an Indonesian immigrant, lovely man, and is the only Indonesian restaurant in Nevada. And he used to be the cook at Thai Basil. If you want the best curry, best food of your life, and best hamburgers, Cactus Jack, 420 North Carson Street.
There you go.
Having to remember the number. Has a secret, awesome, restaurant there.
Okay, we're going there for lunch. Sounds good.
There you go. But I would say my best stories of the Nevada legislature are kind of the heartfelt ones. Tick Siggerbloom actually got me in trouble bringing wine into the Nevada legislature in 2015. But it was a memory of his father, because his father was a painter, and he actually filled the assembly galleries and the third floor with all the photos or all the paintings of Tick Siggerbloom's father, Pyramid Lake, and all the other rural Nevada things. So I actually got to show that to the chairman of the Pyramid Lake Paiute tribe back then, and get kicked out of the building at the same time for bringing in alcohol. So it was a great day. And,
starting good trouble, Will.
Yeah, but I would say my favorite thing is I've been here since I was a kid. I actually closed down the legislature on Sine Die when I was like 5 years old, famously. Told everyone to go home. Before we had a 120-day constitutional legislature, people had to end up just wrapping it up themselves. So I was the child's lobby back then to remind people they had kids at home. So back in the 90s, I actually personally closed down the legislature. But from then to today, I think it's the same welcoming building. It's a little bigger. There's a lot more lobbyists in it, but it is one of the greatest places in America. Nevada legislature is the first legislature to be a majority female legislature.
Yeah, very cool.
We are a purple cowboy state, but we do it right around here, guys. So be proud of your legislature. Be proud of those who serve.
Yeah.
They're not doing it for money. And it's a messy process to get laws done, but know that there's a lot of opinions shared and a lot of work put into it. And the legislation that comes out is usually in a pretty good shape at the end of 120 days.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, Will Adler, I think the lobbyist with the best flow in the building, some of the best hair, and incredible insight. I mean, thank you so much for coming by. We really appreciate it. I learned a lot. Hopefully our listeners do as well, and hopefully it makes them feel encouraged and inspired, and maybe they want to come down and do some citizen lobbying on their own. So, Will Adler, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you, Ben.
One of the great pleasures. We'll have you back sometime soon.
I'd love to. Thank you, guys.